this video, I will show you how to create a 3D scene just like Iman Gadzhi, and we're gonna use a free program called Blender. I haven't seen a tutorial on this yet, so I'm super excited. And by the way, if you want to start earning 2 to 5K a month as a video editor, then do join my Social Creator Club Pro. Link is in the description. You will learn how to find clients and how to get them in, but also deep dives on advanced editing. Of course, there's a pro community that wants to help out, and there's also 2 live calls every week. Now let's jump into it. Now let's go through the scene first. You see this guy working, sitting at his desk. Camera will zoom in, then it will have a shot of this cool goal list. We might have to create this goal list in After Effects, but of course I'm going to show you how to do this. And then later on a top shot of him working. Now let's go to Blender, and when you open it you will see this. And to explain you quickly how to navigate, you can just scroll with your scroll wheel. When you click your middle mouse button, you can turn around a object, and if you hold shift and then click your middle mouse button, then you can move around. If you have issues with this, just let me know. And I'm first gonna create a room, and actually we can use this cube for it now that we're here. I'm first gonna make this cube a bit bigger. You can do that in the object modifier here. So we can just go to the object panel and you can just scale it up here, or we can just go to the scale tool and just drag it up just to make it a bit bigger. Something like this should do. Then I'm gonna first delete some parts of this cube. So I'm gonna go to edit mode, then make sure the face select is selected. If you don't do this, then you will just select points, then select these faces, and then to delete this, press X and then click on faces. There we go. So now we have an open room. That's nice. And what's also really easy is to now select this bottom face, go to the move tool and move this up. And if you hold control, it will actually snap into place. As you can see, it will snap, and we have a simple room. Now let's go back to the object mode, and we need to do a couple things. We actually need some 3D models. So I'm using Sketchfab for this. We can just search man typing, enter. Now make sure it's downloadable and go into the license and turn off standard and editorial if you want free objects. And these are all free. If you also want it animated, you can also select animated. Let's change this to maybe typing. And I actually found this model, which is the exact same model that the editor of Iman is also using. And you can just download this. I'm using the FBX format, so let's download this. And we can just unzip it, and we have the FBX file. Now make sure you have the latest Blender. We can just drag this in, press import, and there we go. We have our man. And now let's go to the move tool and let's move him around a bit. So let's see, maybe position him here, move this a bit, and I'm actually gonna move him into the corner. Can go to the rotate tool, and by the way, you can also press R for rotate, but I'm just gonna use the rotate tool on screen. Or we can actually go to the right here in the object panel and just type in 180 degrees. There we go. So he's on the other side. Let's move him a bit. He's a bit too much to the wall, I think, but we need to see that in a bit. And if you wonder why does he look like a metallic guy, that's because we're in a certain mode of viewing it. Basically here in the top right, you see these viewport shading. If we change this to the rendered view, then we can actually see what that looks like. Okay, now speaking about the rendered view, if we go to the render properties here, so just clicking on that camera, we have a couple of options here, and you have here a couple of render engines. So EV, Workbench, and Cycles. So how it works is that Cycles is actually the best quality, but is also quite slow. If you have a great computer, that's super nice, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just gonna use EV because this mode even works with a slower computer. And especially since the new update, you can also turn on ray tracing, which actually really increases the quality. Now, as you can see, you see samples here. This also affects the speed of rendering later on. I'm gonna click on here and set this to 32, so it's a bit quicker in the render. And you can actually already press play and see that he's animating, as you can see. Really cool. Now we do need some other models, and I'm gonna use Blender Kit for this. And this is a free program that you can download, and it works really nice. We can just type in here a chair, for example, hit enter. Make sure the filter is set to free first, and we will have these chairs. And you can literally just drag one of these in. So if you find one that you like, for example, this one, you can just drag it in, and you can even place it where you want it. If we're lucky, we can even already place it without changing the position later on. Actually, it's quite close, as you can see, but you can of course also download a chair from Sketchfab. Let's move him around a bit, something like this, and we're already getting somewhere. Now I do need a table too. I'm just gonna see if we can find something. Writing table. This is quite close. Let's move this in. And I think we do have to rotate this. So let's just position it here. As you can see, we need to rotate it. So here on the right, I'm just gonna right click on this writing desk and hit select objects. I'm gonna move it to the wall and I'm gonna rotate it just in the object properties here. Set the Z to 0 degrees. There we go. Now, as you can see, his hands are definitely through the table. Now, of course, we can remodel this, but you can also just move it down. It's not a big deal with a table, in my opinion. And I think this works. Let's see if he doesn't. Perfect. So this is cool. We do need some more elements. First of all, a plant. So I'm just going to type in plant. Let's see if we can find something in here. I think this should work. Let's drag this in. Yeah, actually, it looks quite cool. It's really big, but that's nice. It fills the room a bit. So yeah, should work. Let's see if we can select this. Again, right click, select. And let's move this a bit, maybe to here. That should work. Now I also want some art on the wall. Wall art. Maybe just something like this. Let's just drag this in. Let's see. Just to fill up the space a bit. That's cool. Now I'm gonna add the text on the wall. And we do this by going to add and then text, or you can just hit Shift A and then text. So we have the text here. We can drag this up a bit, press tab to change this, and let's change this to 2024. There we go. Then click on the text. Let's set the X rotation to 90 degrees so it's straight up. And of course we can go to this text property here, go to the font and click on this folder, and we can change the font here, for example, to Touche open font. There we go. It's nice. Press tab again to go out of the text edit tool, and let's drag this to the wall. There we go. Zoom in a bit. I think it's a bit too far now. Let's move this to the front. Yes, something like this. Now what I don't like is that, again, it's way too big. So I'm going to scale it down a bit, just going to the scale tool, and then we can scale it down. And then let's go to the move tool. I'm going to move it somewhere around here. And of course, I'm going to add some extrusion, meaning that basically, as you can see, it's not touching the wall. It's now floating, which can be a cool effect too. You can just go into the geometry option, and then we can just add some extrusion, just something like this. Maybe move it a bit more to the back, not too far, something like this. It's cool. Now we just need a MacBook, and what's cool about this model is that there's actually a object modifier, so we can click on here and then we can rotate it, so we can even close this laptop. Bloop. I think that's cool. I'm not sure if we're going to use that. So for now, I'm just going to right click on this object, select objects, and I'm just going to move it around a bit. Let's try to align it a bit with this object. Of course, we need to rotate. Click on browse object to be linked. I'm just going to change this to MacBook Pro. So I'm selecting just the MacBook Pro. Set the Z axis to 0, so it's rotated. And let's move this a bit. Is it under his hands now? I think somewhat should do. Right? Then I also want a iPhone. Let's just drag this in. Probably need to rotate this too. And I also want some notes. Maybe this one. Let's see. Actually, I think this should work. Let's just move this around. Let's zoom in a bit. And by the way, if the zoom goes slow, that means you zoomed in too much. So we just need to select the object. Just press dot on the num key. I'm just going to right click, select objects, and let's just rotate this around. Maybe to something like this. A bit playful, right? And of course, I'm going to do the same with the iPhone. Select object, and let's rotate this a bit too. Maybe something like this. That's cool. All right, we're getting somewhere. Now for this part, this is actually animated, and the best way to do this is to just go to After Effects. So let's just go into After Effects, create a new composition, social media portrait HD, that's fine, press OK. And then we can just write here goals, maybe semi-bold italic. Let's make this a bit bigger. Then let's go to the selection tool and let's move this a bit. Duplicate this, move this to the bottom. Let's make this the best year. Now I'm gonna select this all, Command A, and let's make this a bit smaller and also medium. Go to the selection tool, let's move this around. There we go. Cool. Now to create that calendar, it's actually quite easy. We can just go to the ellipse tool, set the fill to white. Okay, then zoom in, hold space to move around, and just create one single circle. Hold shift while you do this, so something like this. And then go to add repeater, set the copies to 7 and go into the transform, and let's move this position so it's a bit stacked on each other. go to add repeater and go into this one, set this one to 4 and go into the transform. And then the position, we'll set it to 0 on the first value. And then we'll drag the second value out to something like this. There we go. So we have our first block. I think actually it's too big. So let's see if we can scale this down a bit by going into the transform and just scaling it down. There we go. I'm going to move this a bit to the left. Cool. Now I'm going to go into the fill, go a bit further and set a keyframe for the color, and going a bit further and changing the color to a reddish color, something like this. Okay, so we'll basically animate from white to red. It's a cool animation. And now that you've done that, we can just literally select this shape layer, duplicate it, move it over, holding shift, duplicate it, move it over, holding shift, and one last time duplicate it and move it over, holding shift. Let's zoom out, see our alignment, pretty good. Now what's nice is for the next row, we can literally just select these, press Command D on Mac or Control D on Windows. Let's drag these above this so the order is a bit better, and then hold shift and press the down arrow to move this to the bottom. And we'll do this one more time by again selecting all these layers, Command D, moving them to the top and move this down. That's cool. Now, as you can see, they will all animate all together, and that is actually also a cool effect, but we can also offset it a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the 10-second mark. I'm going to cut these layers off by holding Alt and then right bracket, and I'm going to go right click, keyframe assistant, sequence layers, overlap, and then I'm just going to type in 9.25. Okay, they will have an overlap, as you can see. So basically they will appear one by one. So the only thing we now need to do is basically drag this to the left. There we go. So basically there's some overlap now and they animate one by one. It's cool. Drag the end out and that's all we need. Now I need to just render this. One thing that's important, I'm just gonna drag this work area so it doesn't render the whole thing. And when you render it, you need to render it with alpha, meaning with transparency. So we go to composition, add to media encoder. Then I'm gonna change my encoding setting to QuickTime, Apple ProRes 444 with alpha. Now I can call this one 2024 goal list save render. Now we're gonna go back to Blender and I'm gonna go to add image mesh plane. I'm gonna select the file, import, and it will be added as a plane, meaning that we can actually see the object here and we can also render it. Of course, we do have to change it. We already have it selected here, so I can just set the Z rotation to 0 and see if that's the right way up. Yeah, perfect. And now I can just go to the move tool and let's move this around a bit. And let's see if we can get it on that wall. That's cool, it's on the wall. It even casts a shadow, which is, I mean, it's amazing, right? That already looks really cool. Now we also want to create a frame. And to do this, I'm just gonna duplicate this. Now I'm gonna duplicate this by going just to object and then duplicate. We still have the move tool selected, so we can just press escape and it will be duplicated in the same spot. Now let's go to this layer. Let's delete the materials and let's add a new material by just pressing this plus button and just a base color. I'm just gonna change it to like a darker grayish, something like that. Then we just need to make sure that this is basically moved a bit more to the back. So let's just go to object and I'm just gonna click on this arrow next to it so it's a bit further to the back. Cool. So we have our frame that actually works really well. Now we just need to do a couple of things. Of course, we need to stylize it by changing the materials, but also we want to add some animation. Let's do the materials first, and actually I'm gonna add a light to this scene. There's already a light created and I'm just gonna delete that by pressing X, so there's no light in the scene anymore. I'm just gonna go to add light and then area. And then let's move this up. As you can see, this already looks really cool. I'm just gonna move it to the top. I actually like the size of it. As you can see, it's not bright enough at all. It's only 10 watts. We need to increase the brightness by a lot. Probably something like 40. And the bigger this light is, the softer the shadows will be. So if you want a bit of a harsh shadow, we can also change the size. As you can see, the smaller it gets, the harsher the shadow also gets. I'm probably gonna do it a bit in between. I do think the shadows can look cool, so maybe something like this. Now let's texture the scene a bit. For the room, I'm just gonna click on the room and I'm gonna go to the material tab, and there is already a standard material on it. I'm literally just gonna go into the base color and just make it a bit more dark. because it's quite a dark room, something like this. And I'm gonna do the same with the chair. So just select the chair. There's a base color here, which we can also drag down to make a bit more dark, something like here. And as you can see, this chair also has a frame, so we also need to select that, change the base color, and also make it a bit dark. You can also make it blue or any color that you like, but this works really well, as you can see. Now the same with this desk. This wood is really not fitting the scene, and hopefully this object just uses one texture. Now if we open this, as you can see, there's a base color with a color ramp. You can open this and we can actually change the color here. So for example, we can just click on this and make it a bit more dark. Then click on the last color and click on this. Let's also make this a bit more dark. And as you can see, it will really add to the vibe, right? I actually also like this screensaver, but it might be a bit distracting. So I'm gonna change that too. I'm gonna click on the laptop and there's actually a screen material here. And we can literally just remove this by clicking on the X. And there we go, we have a blank screen. Now I do actually want it to light up. So this color is now set to image texture. We can click on this and then just go to input RGB and let's set this to white. And as you can see, it will light up the scene, which is really nice. That's because it's set on a surface emission. I'm happy with this, and actually I'm also gonna change the text 2024. So just click on this, add a new material, because we're still in the material tab. Then I'm gonna go to the emission tab and gonna change the color to a red color, something like this, and then increase the strength. And this will basically make it light up the scene. Now, the only thing I notice is that this goals panel is a bit dark. So I'm gonna add a new light. So go to add light and then spot, there we go. This will add a spotlight. If we move this up, you can see this typical cone shape. And I can just move this to here, and let's move this up a bit. And what I'm gonna do is go into the object and I'm gonna rotate it a bit on the x-axis. Maybe something like this. Let's zoom in a bit. As you can see, it already gives this really cool effect, right? It's like setting the scene. We can also drag this around, by the way, just to move it. It's a bit easier to align it. Now, we can also go into this data property, so basically the light option. And you see a beam shape and you see a blend. And here we can change the blend. So if we turn this to 0, it's really sharp. And actually want it to be a bit more subtle, right? A bit more smooth. Something like this. Cool, I'm quite happy with this scene, so this is nice. Now let's set up the animation. As you can see, we already have a camera. If you don't have that, you can go to add camera. And the cool thing is, if we go to view, align active camera to view, this will basically make sure that the current thing you're looking at is the camera, right? Now we can also go to the object and then we can move this around, and we're basically moving the camera around now. And we can make a really cool animation here. So let's just move this down a bit, something like here. Let's set the Z rotation to 0, the Y rotation to 0. And let's move this a bit to the left, move it down a bit on the Z axis, something like this. And then let's move it forward. So this is already really cool. Basically what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna add shadow depth of field. Basically, shadow depth of field is just like a real camera. Something in front should be blurry, just like in real life. And in Blender, we can just turn the depth of field on in the camera option. So you can just click on this camera icon and then open the depth of field. And then you see the focus distance. This is where it's gonna focus on. And you can actually also pick a object. So if you want it to be focused on our guy sitting here, we can actually just click this eyedropper tool and select this sweater, for example, and it will automatically focus on this sweater. And you also have an f-stop for people that don't really know it. The lower, the more blur you're gonna get. So if this is gonna set to 1, as you can see, this will be really blurry. And if this is set to 10, it will be sharp. For now, I'm gonna probably set it to 1.4. Now we're gonna animate it. And this actually works quite similar as in After Effects. So we can just go to Object, and you can see your values here. And you have a timeline at the bottom. We can just move this to 0 and set a keyframe for the Y axis. So here's a button. You can click that, we'll set a keyframe, and then you can move towards the end and then move this more towards the front. Set another keyframe. And then when we go to the start and we play it, as you can see, we have this really smooth animation. Now, what you might notice is that it's automatically eased. So basically it will ease down into it. The thing is, sometimes they can be useful, but in this case with camera movements, I want them to be smooth. I don't want them to stop. I just want it to be continuous. So you can also just select these keyframes right click, interpolation mode, and just set them to linear. This will make it a bit more harsh, but normally we would just cut the video here, right? Now that's really cool. Now we're just gonna create the other scene, and to do this, just go to the top right and click new scene and just do a full copy. And we can also rename this. So for example, goals, enter. Cool. Now let's again go to the start, and I'm gonna move the camera, of course, move it more to the right, more towards the goals, set it a bit lower, and I'm gonna angle it up a bit. It's really blurry now, as you can see, because it's still focusing on the guy. So let's move this a bit from left to right, maybe with a slight angle to the left, something like here. Okay, that's really dope. I like that. Let's set it here. So this is my first keyframe. I'm just gonna set it on the y-axis again. Now I'm also gonna go to the camera data properties and change this focus on object. So just click on this, there we go. So now it's just focused on this, and now we can literally just go into this camera. Now it will still animate to the previous keyframe, so I'm just gonna select this keyframe, press X, and then delete keyframes. There we go. So we can just go basically set a keyframe on the X-axis, and then let's go a bit further, and then move it to the right. There we go. Set a keyframe, and again, select all your keyframes, right click, interpolation mode, and linear. Just make sure that they're linear. It's just a bit more smooth. Now, as you can see, the animation is really cool. If you want to time this animation a bit, you can too. Just select the goal list, go to the material, and as you can see, you have a couple of settings here. So you have frames, that's the amount of frames you're gonna basically show it. You have a start frame, and you have an offset. Now what you can literally do, let's say we want to pause it here, we can just set it to 100, and it will still exist after it. It will just stop, as you can see. But we can also set the frames to 1, so it's only one frame, and as you can see, it's just frozen now. And then change this frame, for example, with the offset, so it's like just stuck here. And as you can see, it will just be stuck. And that's also really cool, because then we can split up animations, right? We can also set it to be wide first, so you have a shot of it where it's not filled yet. And then later on, we'll just set the frames back to 300 frames and then just have it animate like it's normal. Really cool. Now, if you want a render preview, we can hit F12 to see what it looks like. And this already looks really cool, right? Of course, we can also do some color grading in Premiere, but you can also go to the compositing tab, check the use nodes, and I'm gonna hit Shift A and type in glare. Will be automatically added if we just make sure that we put it between this. And basically what this will do, it sends the image to this, and then we can change the glare here. Now, if you now hit F12, we can actually see what we're doing here. So I'm gonna change this to fog glow. I'm gonna set the threshold to 0.05, enter, and this will add a bit of like a subtle haze to it. Now to render this, I'm just gonna click on the plus, add the video editing tab, so the video editing. Now if we click here, as you can see, we have two scenes. So the first one we didn't rename, but it was called scene. The other one is called goals. Now I just need to create one other scene to render this in. I'm just gonna click on this icon, new scene. You can call this render scene. There we go. And to add the other scenes in here, we can just hit Shift A and then add, for example, first the main scene that we created with the guy sitting there. Shift A, scene, and goals. And this is really familiar if you're with like normal video editing. We can just stack these and like move them on top of each other. We can cut this off a bit, and it works really nice like this. Now we do have to change the output. So basically once this is done, we can go to file format, and I always just like to use the PNG sequence. I'll also make sure that these settings are right. So frame start and end is basically where the scene ends, and the resolution, of course, is also set right. Output is where you're going to save it. Output, accept, and then you can just go to render and then render animation. And then you will get something like this. Do let me know if you want to see more Blender tutorials. Again, don't forget to join the Social Creator Club Pro if you want to make more money with editing, but also learn more about editing, and of course, become a pro editor. And then, like always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and then I'll see you next time.